So our last paper, so I'm going to present our last paper. So I'm an associate professor at GSBA Graduate School of Public and International Affairs. And I run CASI, which is the center that hosts this conference this year. And we're really lucky to have Deacon Keith Condridge. Yes, there's Keith. Hi, Keith. And Reverend Anais Hussein, who are at the Foundation of Hope, and Econ of Crime Professor Jen Doliak. Where's Jen? Let's see. There's there. Okay, I saw her earlier. To be our discussants. So without further ado, I will try to jump into my screen. Sorry, I have two screens, so it's a little. Do you see a full screen? Yeah, full screen. Okay, great. Thank you so much. And then, Robinson, can you tell me if I run out of time? Thank you so much. Okay, let me just move things around a bit. Okay, so this paper is with Marco Castillo at Texas A&M and Regan Petrie at Texas A&M. And it's we thank Rappaport Foundation.
Sera, it's not full screen. Can you?
Oh, it's not. Okay. Let me try again. Sorry, I have a lot of screens. How about that? Is that better? Yes. Okay. Okay, and we thank the Rappaport Foundation for the funding. So the American criminal justice system is huge, and there's 2.3 million people in either jails or prisons or federal prisons, plus twice as much in probation or parole. And for people who are incarcerated, the cost to taxpayers is really big. It's about $30,000 per year for each person. And worse, it doesn't work very well. So overall, a large number of people who are released will go back to jail. For example, in the first year, 40% of people who are released end up back in jail. In the second year, about 20%, and then by the third year, about 10%. So after 3 years, about 70% of people who have been released end up back in jail, which is very, very expensive and very difficult for this population. So the question is, does support services reduce recidivism? So some of the services that are often discussed are like employment. For example, the National Support at Work Demonstration is a big one. And a lot of this employment has shown no effect and heavy attrition. And this has led some scholars to conclude that work doesn't work, or the kind of employment that the parolees are willing to report are not that important in the economic lives of the released prisoners. So these individuals face multifaceted, complex problems that takes a lot of time to untangle. And so some suggest that the programs must build in interpersonal relationships for it to be effective. Okay, so the topic of this talk is on wraparound services, and these are the packages of services such as education, employment, substance abuse treatment, and then like life skills education that is wrapped together with a more comprehensive case management service. Like many services to vulnerable population, like EITC and TANF, these services are underutilized. So in a lot of places, you'll see them used once or twice. And the ones that are longer also has mixed results. So some show better intermediate results, like people participate in substance abuse treatment more. They participate in employment temporarily more, but the effect on rearrest or reincarceration or reconviction is more mixed. So for example, this kind of smaller study in Milwaukee, like 250 people, show that this wraparound services, so education, employment, life skills, treatment, resulted in less rearrests, but it doesn't change reincarceration. And then this much bigger program, which is a federally funded program at 14 states, actually show a negative effect, like more intervention, more intensive help actually resulted in more conviction. And these are conviction of new crimes. So these are not just like parole violations, but actually new crimes. And then another multi-site one showed more rearrest. So this is puzzling, and some researchers such as Jen Joyak here have thought about why this is the case, and maybe we can discuss that more in the breakout session later. But this presentation is about an RCT to increase the use of a reentry program in Pittsburgh. And just to give you kind of an overview of like what we're gonna talk about today, we use an encouragement design that you very, very commonly see out in the world, which is like a loyalty card. The more you use it, then you get closer to a reward, right? Like when you go to a coffee, you get a coffee card. And then our treatment is there's a control where you do not get a reward. There's an easy reward treatment, which you get for 3 visits, then you get your reward. And then there is a hard treatment, which you need to get 5 visits to get the reward. But in all of them, we give people the same reference point, which is please come about 5 times a year. So the design is such that we hope to see whether encouraging clients to use services will affect recidivism. And in the future, we would like to be able to identify, oh, sorry. So I think I have the screens that are like not updating. Okay. So, all right, sorry, let me go back there. So in the design, asking people to come more will possibly induce changes in the composition of services that are used, because as people come more to these wraparound services, they request the services that they need. And the final question is whether or not this encouragement will affect recidivism. And then in the future, some of the work that we started doing are starting to look at complier types and the response to treatment types to see whether or not there's a heterogeneous treatment effect here. So what I'm going to do today is just report preliminary results on this encouragement design on service use and arrest. Okay, so some preview of results. So we find that encouragement do increase visits, and the compositions of visits change, but it's not significant overall. We don't see an overall treatment effects on arrest. There is a lot of messiness in trying to match administrative data on arrest with the organization data on clients for this population. And Anais and Keith would be able to tell us more about that. But there's some suggestive evidence that the hard reward, the 5-visit reward might have a negative effect, and the easy reward is less negative. Okay. All right. So here we work with Foundation of Hope. They have a service for people who have left jail called Aftercare Service. And they have pre-release program that are like CBT type of program, but it's not part of the RCT. Anyone can use this service, anyone that has left the jail. So some other programs may require referral from the Federal Bureau of Prisons or from probation, but not this service. And the service includes short-run basic needs and long-run stability services that help stability, such as housing and job referrals and peer mentorship. And then they just go provide ongoing support, counsel, and friendship to the population. Okay, so the implementation is we recruit people who are calling or walking in during study hours. So you see on the right side of the screen, there is specific study hours where our RAs are there. So this is the caseworker are blinded from the treatment, and that's why our RAs are the one that is doing the randomization and doing all the administration for the task. Once somebody is interested in the study, then they do a survey, and then basically they agree to let us track their service usage and criminal justice involvement for 3 years. So this criminal justice information is public information. And then as a reward for participating in the study, we provide them with a bus pass. And this is one of the most common help that is requested from this population from Foundation of Hope. And in Pittsburgh, $24 in bus pass, like a trip is about $2.75. So it's enough to get you, back and forth, like 4 or 5 round trips. and very few people refused to enroll in the study. Okay, so these are like our frequent user cards. So all of them are the same in general design. In the hard, you have 5 little boxes that you have to get signatures from, or like we don't actually have physical signature, it just like looks like that. And then once you have them all, if you completed your 5 visits, then you get a $50 gift card. In the easy one, we also set it at 5. We write, at least 5 services, but we pre-sign 2 of them to get you closer to your goal. And then the control, we just don't have any of those little boxes. Okay, so these are randomized. You just had, as people come in, there's a stack of cards that has been shuffled and they just pull one out. Okay, so I've talked about this timeline. I think the main thing is once after the randomization, people come in from the visits, and the clients usually say, usually the caseworker will ask them like, what do you want to work on today? And then the clients will choose the service. And then in the easy or hard case, we order the debit card after the nth visit. They pick up the card, and then we continue to observe their visits and continue to collect criminal records. So we targeted 700 based on the power calculation of the effect size inside of the jail. But we got to 335, and then COVID happened. And then basically everything shut down. And COVID has affected this experiment. I'll show you in multiple other ways, such as like arrest rates as well. So we currently have 535 enrolled. Okay, so I'm going to show you some demographics data and then talk about how the effect of the treatments on visits and on the kinds of engagement they're having with the reentry service provider. And then after this, I'll talk about the arrest data. Okay, so this is the demographics. So it's 14% female. Only 26% of people are employed. Most of them are single with children, and 46% are Black. The median arrest year is 2017, and they were incarcerated for about 8 months during their last incarceration. So that puts them at about a year within their their date of leaving jail, right? Like if you think about that, the likelihood of being rearrested given the time you've spent outside of jail. 13% of them, for 13% of them, this is their first arrest, and 78% of them are arrested in Pennsylvania. So these are other resources that they have, right? So in the subsidy thing, like one thing to ask is like, do they have the resources to get there? Do they have other resources that they're using? We haven't really gone into our using the service substitute or complements to other services, but it was just like, but we just want to show you the data. So 44% of people are using other services. Like one big one is AA, NA, or like behavioral health. 16% are in actual substance abuse treatment. 39% goes to church, and 74% have a phone. And a really big part of this population is halfway homes, which are places that you can stay in once you leave jail before you return to your family, or maybe you're still looking for a place. People don't have cars, so transportation is difficult. About 38% use buses with a median travel time of 45 minutes, and then 46% are walking. And 63% of them, this is their first time coming to the foundation, so they're first time users. And overall through the experiment, we see them coming about 2.6 times in the 10 months that we have them in this experiment. Okay, so that's sort of like that picture over there, kind of gives you a picture of the foundation is this dot right here. And then these are the areas that most of the people are coming from. So that's within bus, right? It's a single bus, right? Or within, like the guys here are within walking. Okay, so what are the treatment effects on the visits? So on the x-axis here, we have the number of visits since the date of enrollment. And we are looking at 10 months because we only have data until December, and then COVID hits in March. So like February, late February was our last recruitment. So we have about 10 months of data for the last batch of people. So in order to make everybody the same, we cut everything at 10 months. So as you can see here, the incentivized group, the hard, which is the 5-visit group, and the easy, which is the 3-visit groups, come more often than the control group. So it was having an effect. And here you can see the number of people who came 0 to 2 times, 3 to 4 times, and 5 times. And the control group, which has an average of 2.2 visits, basically, most of them came once. And the hard group came 2.8 times, and this is significantly different. And the easy group, you see that there's a lot of people coming 3 times, 3 or 4 times. So in number of visits increased to 3.26. Sorry, it's not clicking. Oh, there you go. Okay. So for the service requested changes in types as they come over time. So in the beginning, a lot of the services were related to necessities like clothing, housing, and transportation. And this is even after controlling for how long they've left jail. So the services were shifting from the long term to from the short term to the long term. Although because there wasn't so many people that shifted all the way to 3, 4, 5, the overall effect wasn't significant. So here we see that things are kind of pointing in the right direction. The incentive increased engagement. There were more people that came, and more people were requesting basic needs, and more people were also requesting jobs, legal, and social services. So the long-term thing, the short-term thing, and the basic services. But when we look at arrest data, the picture is a little bit fuzzier. So for the arrest data, we requested administrative data from the Pennsylvania Unified Judicial System. So this just gives us arrests in Pennsylvania. We combine this formal public data access request with our own docket sheet lookup. So like we actually go into the UJS system, enter names, enter date of birth, and then like look up people's arrest. And some records have been expunged. And then the two systems are a little different. Like when we looked it up, we have a wildcard, and then when we use the FOIA system, it's like it's a exact match. And so we are still working on some of these matches. The federal system is called PACER, but it doesn't have a date of birth, so it's difficult to verify identity. So this was a challenge, trying to wrangle this arrest data and making sure that like who we see is actually the person that is in the record. Okay, so when we look at the data, we have 20% of people have been arrested if we look at all the data that we have. But if we look at only 10 months, which is the range of time that we're using, there is, thanks Razan, there is 16% of people have been arrested. But we were able to only match the name and date of birth of 78% of this population. So, you know, that kind of creates some bounds on like what we can tell about the effect of the treatment. There's also another complication to the arrest, which is this. So part of the time period that we were working with had both COVID and also more spotlight on policing, right? The George Floyd murder in May. And arrests dropped a lot after those two events. So what ends up happening is the people that were recruited, the people whose 10 months was outside of this time zone were arrested at a much higher rate than the people whose 10-month period overlaps with this time zone. So here, if you joined the study before May 19th, your arrest rate is roughly comparable to the chart that I show you about arrest rate between the first and the second year. But if you join after May 19th, then the arrest rate is a lot lower. So something that we're going to do also is we have 200 of the clients that weren't recruited because they weren't on the study dates. And then we're going to try to compare them to these clients that are in the study dates. Okay, so actually what we found was that these are the left side of the screen is the probability of arrest since the date of enrollment. So the x-axis is the months from the 1st to the 10th month. And then the y-axis is the probability of arrest. And you can see here that the top line, which is the people who are incentivized to come, they would get a reward after coming 5 times, actually are more likely to be arrested after like month 6, onward. There is no significant effect on the number of arrests. But when we run this as a regression, we also find that up to 10, for the hard group, like what we saw earlier when I discussed the wraparound service results, the group that was incentivized to get a reward after coming 5 times are actually more likely to be arrested. So this is like 5 percentage point. So if we consider, and then the other variables here are age, so older, slightly more likely to be arrested, and then it drops. And female are a little bit less likely to be arrested. People who are employed, a little bit less likely to be arrested. But when we think about the group of people who wasn't able to be matched, and then try to use that to introduce some uncertainty in the bounds here, we could think about this a couple ways. So one of it is that if someone is not arrested, someone's identity cannot be verified at 22%, we can consider them not arrested, and then you would get this effects here. And then another possibility is you think of the people whose identity can't be verified at this point as being arrested, and you will get this bounds that is on column 3. Or another possibility of progressing with this is to drop people with unverified identity. But all throughout, what we see is there isn't like a strong negative effect of the encouragement design. And if anything, there is some suggestive evidence that the hard treatment has a negative effect. Okay. So in summary, this is puzzling. We see a positive effect kind of in the engagement with the organization, and things seem to be pointing to the right direction, but then on the recidivism itself, we do not see a positive effect. So overall, there seems to be barriers to using aftercare services, and incentives can increase the use, but not a lot. The encouragement can lead to the use of additional services, and the composition of services can change from the short-term needs to longer-term needs, though we don't have it, though it's not statistically significant here. And then consistent with the other literature, we have this positive interim result, but we don't have a positive overall effect on recidivism. Right? So in the future, some of the things that we are going to work on are trying to think about the heterogeneous treatment effect, like for compliers. So some of the population do not react to the treatment assignment at all. You know, if they're going once or twice, they're still going once or twice. And some are the population that you can actually move by offering them rewards, they increase their visits. I don't have time to talk about that today. But so overall, we need to do more work here. It's consistent with the literature, but the big question is why? And maybe are these interim results actually pointing to some positive result that might take a while to resolve before we see any effect on recidivism? Okay, thank you. So I will turn this over to Deacon Keith Condridge, Reverend Anais, and Jen. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Sarah. So there is a question in the chat, general question about recidivism. Has anyone thought, proposed making cash transfers to ex-convicts, given that them going back to jail is so expensive? Is there evidence of the effect of cash transfers on crime?
Muted. I think Jen knows this much better, but I think there is one where they give them gate money, right? Like when they leave jail, is that right?
Yeah, we can talk about this in the discussion section. It probably makes more sense.
Okay. Yeah. So there's a plug for our discussion section where we talk about giving people money as they leave jail.
Great. I don't see any other questions in the chat. Anybody else has questions, please raise your hand so we can attend to those. Yeah. Let's see.
Yeah, I was wondering about the effect on recidivism for the hard treatment. I think all your analysis, it looks to me, are for the intent to treat, right? If you break it down into, those who are actually treated, so you give them the bus ticket. So what would the results still hold if you only look at people who utilize the service?
So if we look at just the people that reaches 3 or reaches 5 and actually like got to the target,
Or come at least once?
I think everybody did come at least
Every-
once,
at
right?
least
Yeah,
once.
everybody
Okay.
came at least once, right?
Yeah.
So these are clients that are coming to Foundation of Hope, and while there, we tell them about the study.
I see.
Mhm.
So I guess if you put them into different buckets in terms of how many times they come, where are the effects? You know, where do you see? I'm thinking of maybe a histogram with people in different buckets of in terms of the number of times they utilize the service and recidivism.
So the negative effect seems to be coming from the group that has the hard incentive and came 0 to 2 times, right? So they, you know, so Marco checked for discouragement and is convinced that it's not discouragement. Though, like, you know, I haven't looked at this check, but you know, this is something that you would think of, right? Like you're given target that is too high, and you're like, well, no, you know, I don't want to do this. But yeah, but Marco doesn't think it is. We also have another group that we did not tell about the program at all, that we, you know, haven't looked at to compare to this to see if it's a discouragement effect. But that's a great question.
While we're waiting to see if anyone else has questions formulated, Sarah, I'm wondering if you could just talk a little bit about how you all, Marco specifically, I guess, looked at discouragement as a possible factor in that.
I can't speak for Marco, but like I think what I was holding, so we have a sample of people who we surveyed and interviewed, but weren't told about the study at all. And this was the group that we want to compare against this group to see whether or not they were coming, this group was coming less than that group, or this group was getting arrested more than that group. So we're not finding that.
Thank you.
I'm curious, while we're in this room, what your takeaways, Sarah, are about kind of the policy implications, and how those of you at the Foundation of Hope, like how I'm sure you all have talked about what to make of this and what to do with it. I'm curious what, I don't know, what are your main takeaways, both as researcher and provider?
I mean, I can say a little bit, but like, I also want to hear what Keith thinks about this. But for me, I think what's, so Jen has a paper that thinks about the possibility why this wraparound services might have issues, right? Like what are the problems? So one of it is that each of the service may not be that effective. Another one is like the wraparound services might be under-resourced such that it's difficult to deliver such a wide range of services. Another possibility could be that it's, you know, directing the resources from other kinds of resources that they might be using, or a signal that like, oh, you know, you need more help to be overcoming this. So I think in ours, we equally tell everybody to like come about 5 times a year. And then we have a list of the resources that they were using at the time they come to the service. And it would be interesting to see if there was any substitution from that list of services that they were using earlier. But I would be super interested in finding out why. And I think like the outlines that you had on these 4 possibilities are like a really great starting point. But
I would just add to that, you know, just in the short time we have here, and we can maybe get more into it in the discussion room. But I mean, honestly, reentry is a very complicated process, right? So one of the most important takeaways that we've taken from these initial results that we've seen early on, and Sarah referred to it in one of her early slides, was the importance of relationship, the importance of building community. and establishing a trust. So many of the men and women that we work with have been sent from one organization to the next without receiving any tangible assistance. Whether that assistance has been effective in thwarting recidivism or not, it just creates a downward spiral of frustration, of discouragement, and of returning to old habits and old behaviors, right? So one of the important takeaways that we kind of felt intuitively, but the study is starting to bear out, is the importance that of the relationship component, and do they trust us? So even if they end up back in jail after 2 or 3 or 5 visits to us, who do they come to first when they get released the next time? And it's a progressive thing, So I don't think any of us thought that, or think naively that Foundation of Hope or any reentry program for that matter is the silver bullet. But I think we need to continue to focus on building relationships of trust. And again, there's multiple mitigating factors. I mean, we can help an individual navigate the system. So, people are very frustrated on a simple level, trying to get an ID, for instance, and that's in COVID times, you can't speak to a live person. And so someone tries to go online and maybe they've been, incarcerated for 5 or 6 or 10, 20 years. They've never had to access any services online, right? So we help them to navigate that system to obtain the basic needs they have. But then again, there's a lot of other factors at play there. So I'm kind of rambling, but I think the biggest takeaway at this point in the survey is the relational piece, not the transactional piece.
That makes me think of kind of a follow-up question. Sera, are you able to look at number of subsequent arrests rather than just the probability of arrest?
Yeah. There's no effect on the number of subsequent arrests. And then we don't know whether, they were convicted or not. Oh, and then Marco is also here. Can we unmute Marco? Rosen, did you find him? Okay, great.
Okay, I can speak now.
Perfect. Yeah.
Okay, great. I think that there are some very important questions here. I think that one of the things that Sera didn't have the time to present is that there might be this heterogeneity in the way this works, right? So there are many people first that are not reacting to the incentives, and therefore it's very hard to know what will happen in those cases unless we generate some much larger incentives. The second one is that among those that react, there seems to be, at least with the preliminary data we have, and I'm going to emphasize the preliminary in a second a little bit more, that it might be that some of the changes in visits actually was moving in the right direction, reducing recidivism, but it happens that for some, it seems to have increased it, right? So the discussions that we're having right now is to try to understand a little more that this data is quite complex. And one of the things that we are starting to realize is that it's not that just visits were affected by COVID, but also the dynamics of arrests might have been affected by COVID. So like about half of our sample is in a sense affected by the whole thing. So we want to be cautious in not to say, okay, so we have found that these are not working in this particular way or particular in different direction. I think that the lesson here is that there are several ways to react to the policy, and it might be beneficial for some more than others. And second, that we still need to kind of figure out, resolve these uncertainties that we talk about, right? This issue that we really still have missing data for a significant portion of them. And also there is a big portion of them have been extremely affected by, for example, if you look at the data later in the year, the distribution of visits is very different from the beginning of the study. So when we see in the study, we have a nice distribution of visits. That doesn't happen in the second part. Indeed, it might actually prevent us from even making some conclusions because the data is not rich enough because of all these shocks. So I think that I just want to bring that up. I think the heterogeneity of response is very important here, that policies might not work for everyone. but it might work very well for some and maybe not some others. But also, I think that I would be cautious in trying to be very concrete, like we have these final results, because I think our data has been badly shocked by COVID.
If I could just add to what Marco's saying. So a real life example of that, in terms of someone comes to us pre-COVID for services, and let's say they're looking for a AA or NA meeting, and we connect them with that. We provide them support. Even our own internal support program, we have a support group for reentrants. Post-COVID now, we're not meeting in person. We're either meeting by Zoom or we're meeting over the phone. And it's a fact that those types of support group meetings are much less effective for the individuals we serve if they're not in person. Again, going back to the relationship piece. So, if you're just going to NA or AA, or you've been going for a while and it's been very positive for you, then all of a sudden those relationships that they have ended effectively. And many of the individuals that we serve, virtual meetings like this are not effective ways to help them. So I think that's a tangible example of what Marco's saying.